There are warriors who thirst for battle. They feel complete on the battlefield. But there are also warriors who do not crave combat. They train their minds and bodies in the art of combat not for the love of battle, but to better themselves physically, mentally, and spiritually. But it is these warriors who, you could argue, have attained a new understanding of themselves and life through their training. Such is the Shaolin, warrior monks and for honor who once were pacifists and peace-loving Buddhists and now are some of the most dangerous and unpredictable warriors in for honor's world. But who are the Shaolin? And what are they based on? Do their real-world equivalents act the same as they do? Let's talk about it. Welcome back to Heroes in History, where we take a look at all of the For Honor's heroes and who they are based on in history and whether or not they do their real-world counterparts justice. And today, we are talking about the Shaolin. Now, as many of you are likely aware, the Shaolin is based on a real group, and this group is still around today. In fact, they might be the only For Honor heroes whose historical counterparts still exist today. The Shaolin monks are based on the warrior monks of the Shaolin Monastery in the Hainan province of China. It's thought to have been built and established back during the 5th century BC and still stands today as a major tourist attraction and home of the primary school of Shaolin Buddhism. The monastery got its name from the forested mountain Shaoxi, and the temple was intended for the secluded and uninterrupted study and practice of Chan Buddhism. The origins of the martial arts taught in the Shaolin Temple are debated generally. The popular narrative is that the Bodhidharma, a Chan Buddhist master, traveled from India to China and found the Shaolin Temple where he trained the monks in the ways of combat. However, further exploration of physical combat and martial arts is believed to have taken place during the Sui dynasty, where Shaolin monks began building fighting systems of their own. While Buddhism is stereotypically and generally considered passive in nature and never being aggressive, the martial arts adopted and practiced by the Shaolin is not so much about being aggressive and dangerous as it is about mastering one's own body and spiritual nature. The temple itself has developed a fantastic reputation throughout history. In fact, it's documented that Kublai Khan, the founder of the Yuan dynasty, ordered all Buddhist temples in China to be led by the Shaolin, and during the Ming dynasty, at least 8 princes and political leaders converted to Shaolin teachings. The Shaolin monks have had a long and proud history, one that preaches enlightenment and improvement of one's own mind and body. Buddhism itself is a philosophy more than a religion, teaching one the proper path to reaching the state of enlightenment. Though most schools of Buddhism teach pacifism and avoiding violence, the Shaolin monks were famously skilled in physical combat, although most of their exploits recorded in history seem to be more of a defensive nature. The first recorded incident of the Shaolin engaging in combat were during the end of the Sui dynasty in 610 AD, when they defended their monastery from a large gang of bandits seeking the treasures in the temple. They also were engaged in conflict with Wang Shichong in the Battle of Hulao, only 11 years after that. Wang Shichong had declared himself Emperor of China, and in his war with the current Emperor Wen, had discovered the Cyprus Valley Estate, which was a highly strategic position from which his forces would have a good view of Liaoyang, the ancient capital of China. However, this estate was owned by the Shaolin monks, and so Wang Shichong sent his forces to take the estate and march on the temple itself as a show of force. The monks allied themselves with one of Wen's military leaders and helped him not only fight back the attack on their temple, but also to retake the estate. They crushed Wang Shichong's forces, and that military leader that they helped, Li Shimin, later would become the second Tang Dynasty emperor, and remembering their help, Li Shimin was very good to the Shaolin during his rule. However, we need to make it clear that the documentation that talks about these battles during the Sui and Tang dynasty do not actually mention the martial arts abilities of the monks. At this point in time, we can just assume that they were helpers in the war rather than masters of martial arts. When did that happen? Well, something changed. There's absolutely no sources that I've been able to find in reference to the Shaolin monks in battle after the Tang dynasty up until the Ming dynasty. During the Ming dynasty, there are at least 40 known references to the monks in combat, and what's more, there were specific references and nods to their martial arts skill, mentioning them employing weapons such as their bare-handed attacks, their spears, and of course their most famous weapon, the waxwood staff, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Now, around the mid-16th century, military leaders were traveling to the temple to learn their combat arts, and in 1621, the earliest manuscript on Shaolin fighting arts was published called Exposition of the Original Shaolin Staff Method. It's recorded that, from the Shaolin, several famous martial arts began to appear, such as Tai Chi, Bagua Quan, Qingyi Quan, and Bazi Quan. The use of various exotic weapons began to appear as well, which we'll discuss in probably another video. There's even evidence that the Shaolin monks were called to fight against the Wukong, bands of pirates who were raiding the coast of China. Their most famous battle was at Wangjianggang, where a Shaolin monk named Tian Yuan led 120 monks against a pirate group over 100 strong. And while the monks only suffered 4 casualties, that's right, 4 casualties, the pirates suffered 100 before the battle was through. It should be noted, though, that not all the monks in this battle were Shaolin. Some were from other schools and temples, and rivalries were even birthed in these battles. The Shaolin monks are probably one of the most famous Chinese martial arts masters featured in pop culture. There have been dozens of TV shows, movies, and books created centering around the Shaolin. In fact, there's a form of Chinese literature called Wu Lin, which references Chinese martial arts warrior heroes who are usually lower class citizens or monks or people who don't serve the rich and powerful, who travel the world using their ancient Chinese martial arts skills to right injustices and wrongs. Famous examples of these can be seen in Chinese movies like Ip Man or Jackie Chan movies, or movies involving a martial artist who has mastered a form of martial arts skill and uses that to right wrongs even though he himself has no personal power. Shaolin monks could actually sometimes be featured, or their skills and techniques be featured in these kind of literatures. But a question has to be asked. Why now? What happened in the Ming Dynasty that led to the development of these martial arts and others? Well, the Henan province where the Shaolin Temple was located was in a state of unrest and lawlessness. In the late Ming Dynasty and into the Qing Dynasty, this area was populated but lacked any form of governmental control, and for this reason, the need for learning self-defense, methods, and combat arts became crucial. Shaolin monks would develop means of self-defense, and it's likely natives of the region would go to them for training, schooling, or for help. Now, that's not to say that the Chinese government didn't have any presence there, just not enough to stop any amount of lawlessness that would have required personal self-defense training. The Shaolin Temple still stands today, with monks who still live and train there in martial arts, as well as practicing their Buddhist teachings. The temple is considered a world historical landmark, especially by the Chinese, and it is a heavy tourist attraction and possibly the most famous Buddhist temple in the entire world. Shaolin monks are still famous for their martial arts capabilities, and people have met and studied under them even to this day. There are plenty of legends created about the Shaolin monks, some probably more fantastical than the others. There are legends that they still have dark, secretive martial arts locked away in their temple that they won't teach to anyone but the highest masters, which sounds a bit like fiction to me, but hey, I've never been there, so I don't know. There are legends that they have supernatural powers that they just don't show to the public, and again, I doubt that highly. But what is known is that because of their martial skills and all the martial arts that they've developed, they are possibly the most famous martial artists in the world. In fact, other nations have borrowed some of their teachings. In fact, Shotokan karate that was developed in Okinawa is believed to have originated from Shaolin monk teachings. The legend goes that a Shaolin monk traveled to Okinawa and saw what the Okinawan people were dealing with. They're an island nation just under Japan, and so they deal with pirates and raiders all the time. To help protect them, the Shaolin monk taught them the ways of Kung Fu, which they combined with the art of Jiu-Jitsu already practiced by the samurai, and thus developed a new way of defending themselves called karate. Okay, so now I'm sure you're all wondering, how do Shaolin monks and the Shaolin from For Honor differ, and how are they similar? Well, let's start with areas that they differ. The Shaolin in For Honor, for some of his cosmetics, has hair. This is a big no-no. Monks could not have long hair or any hair at all. They had to shave their heads. Also, Shaolin monks are gender-locked as male, and there is a slight problem with this too. While the Shaolin Temple mostly has male monks, the abbot Shi Yongchen revealed that there have been female Shaolin nuns since the inception of the temple. While never as large as the male demographic, they have always existed, so there could be Shaolin nuns. Also, the garments he wears are not the orange or gray robes of the typical Shaolin. In fact, this looks more like a kind of gi with some metal attachments and jewelry on it. The waxwood staff they wield have weighted ends as well, and that would also not be typical, as the staff of the monks would typically not be weighted and would simply be a staff for walking as well as defense. And then there's his weird monkey-like behavior. I would also like to take another moment here to talk about Shaolin's other big influence besides the Shaolin monks. Sun Wukong. The Journey to the West is one of China's most famous classical pieces of literature. It tells the story of a monk named Xuanzang who is traveling to the West to pick up the Buddhist scriptures and then return them to China to share them with the world. But demons and monsters along the way wish to kill and eat him, so he's going to need some assistance. Enter the Monkey King, Sun Wukong, one of the most powerful warriors in Eastern fiction. So powerful and unkillable, he literally waged a war against the gods all by himself and challenged the Jade Emperor to his throne. Sun Wukong is a stone monkey with powers to transform into whatever form he likes, wield a giant pillar that he uses as a staff, and can use his body hair to create clones for himself. He's insanely powerful and one of the greatest assets and allies to Xuanzang in his journey. He's been an inspiration on various anime throughout the years, including Luffy from One Piece, Naruto from Naruto, Ranma 1/2, The Gods of High School, and most famously, Dragon Ball, wherein the titular character Goku was heavily inspired by Sun Wukong. This inspiration is where the Shaolin gets his monkey-like attributes, his monkey mask cosmetics, his weird monkey-like behavior, and even his staff combat. Even one of his executions seems to be a nod to Sun Wukong, where he summons clones of himself to attack his foe. But what about the Shaolin monks? Is there anything we can take from them? Leaving out Sun Wukong, is there anything else from the Shaolin monks that the Shaolin and For Honor have in common? Well, yes, let's look at a few things. One of Shaolin's voice lines when he does his kicking attack is Namo Imoto Fo, which is a standard Buddhist greeting, which means Buddha bless you. In some of his attacks, he refers to himself as a Vajra, or a warrior of Buddha. Which one could argue the Shaolin are. Also, though it wouldn't have weighted ends, the staff is the most famous weapon of the Shaolin. It's a weapon the monks would take with them regularly, and its flexible structure allowed for significant recoil in the strikes, which could potentially break bones if struck hard enough. Also, the standard default look of the Shaolin has him looking pretty close to normal Shaolin, with a bald head and his staff, but the robes just don't fit. He wouldn't have tattoos, his robes would not look like a gi, they'd be actual gray or orange robes. And he wouldn't wear any kind of metal ornamentation on him, including the wrist bracers. So there's definite proper references there, but I definitely don't think it's exactly accurate. I highly recommend watching Ranton's video on the Shaolin, where a real Shaolin monk reacts to For Honor's Wu Lin. He does a pretty good job on that. I'll link it in the description. He's someone who's actually trained and lived in the Shaolin Temple, and he gives a very detailed reaction to the way For Honor handled the Wu Lin and what's realistic and what's not. Though I've trained in martial arts, my knowledge is not nearly as deep as his on the Shaolin, so I will link his video for you to see for yourself to get a better idea of what's right and wrong about the movements. All in all, it's clear that the Shaolin and For Honor might not be exactly like their real-world counterparts. However, the monks of the Shaolin Temple have stood the test of time and still exist today. Despite this, they have maintained a legendary status. Modern science still cannot explain all of their feats and skills, and even if only half of their exploits are true, it's easy to see why they were such an inspiration to the warrior that arrived in For Honor with marching fire, the Shaolin. Thank you guys for watching this episode of Heroes in History. I hope you enjoyed. Please drop a subscription if you haven't yet, a comment if you'd like to tell me what you think, and a like just to let me know you enjoyed the video. And I will see you in my next video. Take care.
We